Well, I guess I'm into Cartier now. No, I didn't buy this. This watch belongs to a friend and watchmaker, Kelly Hunter, at Art of the Watch. The other day when Kelly showed this off at a virtual watch meetup, I nearly fell off my chair, and I'll explain why. This platinum Cartier Tortue isn't new or a steel sports watch or shit, it doesn't even sell for a premium on the used market. So if you're only into what's trendy, this isn't the video for you. Bye. This is simply a beautiful, rare, classical timepiece from a very interesting collection. I wanted to make this video because there just isn't a lot of information out there about this watch or this line. So I'll do my best to offer what I've learned, in the hopes that this video can be a resource to others. The Tortue has been in the Cartier lineup for over 100 years. It was made available to the public the same year that the Santos was, 1912. That's 5 years before even the Cartier tank. Tortue means turtle in French. The case shape is reminiscent of a turtle shell to someone who hasn't been to a zoo in a while. The Tortue has seen plenty of iterations and complications over the decades, but manually wound and time only is the quintessential style, and that's the case with many Cartier watches. From 1998 to 2008, Cartier produced a higher quality, smaller batch collection of watches. The program was called the Collection Priveé Cartier Paris. For those of us who speak American, Collection Priveé Cartier Paris. Many people just refer to it now as the CPCP. The goal of the CPCP was to go back into the brand's archives and make historical designs with top-tier movements and make them in relatively small quantities, anywhere from 300 down to 50 of certain timepieces. But nobody really knows how many were made. What we do know is that collectors appreciated the CPCP line, and it seems that Cartier learned something. They learned that there was indeed a market for higher quality and more expensive watches than they were offering in the 80s and 90s. And I think the CPCP program had a big influence on the quality and type of watches that Cartier sells today. This Tortue is from the CPCP, the private collection, and there are fewer than 300 of these in the world. The Prive or CPCP Tortue was made in at least 3 sizes, and this is likely the medium size. As you might know from my videos on the Santos, a medium Cartier means medium according to traditional watch sizes, not modern ones. This watch is 34mm across and 43mm long. I know that sounds small, and maybe it even looks too small on my 7-inch wrist, but wearing it, it feels perfect. I'd like to see what the large looks like, but I assume the lugs would start hanging over the edges of my wrist. And then there's the weight. Even at this medium size and with no complications, the head of this watch weighs over 80 grams, which is about the same weight as the head of a modern Rolex Submariner. Platinum is one hell of a precious metal. It's dense. If the case was any larger, I'd be concerned that the watch would start to feel unbalanced on the wrist. There are a few subtle details that, to a trained eye, demonstrate that this is no ordinary Tortue. Most clear might be the hands. Most modern Cartier watches like this gold Tortue use sword hands. But Breguet-style hands, like those on this platinum CPCP reference, were traditionally used on many Cartier watches going back a century. One additional clear throwback is the Paris text under the Cartier wordmark. That's another design element that the manufacturer usually reserved for special pieces. Then there's the dial itself. Cartier does spectacular guilloche patterns on many watches, but at the time this Tortue was produced, only watches from the CPCP were given this rose motif in the center of the dial. And while you can't tell by looking, there's something else about this dial that's unique to the private collection. The dial is actually made of 18-karat gold, with a silver layer applied on top. Again, the Collection Priveé ran from 1998 to 2008. During this time, many standard Cartier watches used reliable but pretty commonplace movements from ETA, so to differentiate the private collection, all CPCP watches used higher grade movements from highly regarded manufacturers like Frédéric Piguet, Jaeger-LeCoultre, and Piaget. One of the more collectible pieces in the CPCP was the Tortue monopusher chronograph. That movement was developed by the now famous watchmakers Vianney Halter, Denis Flageolet of De Bethune, and François-Paul Journe. The movement inside this Tortue is the manually wound Cartier caliber 437MC, which has as its base a Piaget 430P. You can see Cartier put some work into it to make it their own, including adding the well-known double C decorations. Also on the back of the case, you can see the case number, which is 2518D. The case number places this specific watch somewhere between 2000 and 2003. I've noticed that later references of this watch have smaller screw heads on the lugs and only on the 9 o'clock side, whereas this watch has larger screw heads on every lug. I'm sure one of you cares about that detail, and to you I say, you have my respect and my concern. I've got a crush on the Cartier Tortue, and not just this platinum CPCP reference. I'm generally not a dress watch guy, but I can't shake wanting to own one of these. In the time-only version, what draws my eye to the Tortue is its shape and proportions. The dial is the perfect proportion for this watch, giving the bezel, if you can call it that, enough size to let you really appreciate its precious metal curves. I look at the Cartier Drive and the Cartier Tonneau. They're both beautiful watches, and they're somewhat reminiscent of the Tortue, but for me they don't come close to matching the elegance of this watch. The Collection Priveé ended quietly in 2008. Some people speculate that Cartier realized the times had changed and that modern high-end collections should feature in-house movements and components. That same year, Cartier launched a new collection, the Fine Watchmaking Collection. It features some truly jaw-dropping horological chops. Halo pieces, it seems to me. Amazing stuff, but out of reach for most collectors, and even if they weren't as expensive, maybe just too much watch for me. Which is all the more reason I appreciate this Tortue and the Collection Privé it came from. The CPCP and watches like this are a quiet, interesting, and often forgotten corner of the watch world. I think there are many corners like this, so I'm glad I got to shed just a little light on this one.